Welcome, boys and girls. Costin here with a discussion about the Changeling campaign and the 5 fatal flaws that plague this campaign to this day since it has come out. I think it is actually a significantly missed opportunity by Creative Assembly that they have never gone back and fixed some of the issues of this campaign. Or certainly fixed some of the bugs, because the entire Changeling campaign is predicated on these various schemes. But more often than not, when you're playing one of these campaigns as the Changeling, they will break. Especially if you go outside of the Empire. Like I've seen Norska especially becoming a problem zone in a campaign, the Darklands, the Mountains of Morn. But yeah, various things can and will break. And that is probably the biggest flaw of the entire Changeling campaign. That this is a campaign system built on intricate decisions made across the entire world. So when something breaks, it doesn't just have a small effect, it ends up having a pretty substantial effect, especially with regards to schemes, which one should note, in order to win your campaign or get further along in the campaign, you need to complete schemes. If schemes do not work properly, then that creates a lot of issues. It's not even a question of the victory conditions, really, it's just being able to play the campaign as was intended. So that is the biggest and most substantial fatal flaw in a Changeling campaign. We could talk about his faction effects. He doesn't really have any worth talking about, with the exception of like replenishing and recruiting in foreign territory, which kind of plays in his entire role. Everything else is just an explanation for his unique playstyle. His skill line is a bit interesting though, because he obviously can take the form of various heroes, or lords rather, that he has defeated in battle. So for instance, over here the only one that I have is Festus, if I want to focus on that. But then he has a bunch of benefits with regards to magic. He's no slouch in combat either. He's no slouch as a caster lord either. So the Changeling should be a pretty good lord, and can be a pretty good lord if you were to gain control of him. Good luck confederating him even as Kairos, because of the very nature of his campaign. It's really a shame with regards to his AI. Creative Assembly has stated that they are looking to improve both sieges and campaign AI, and they are going to be talking about that in a soon to be released stream that they're going to do about various subjects. But then we should talk about the settlement mechanic, because right now the way the settlements work for the Changeling is just crazy. I suppose it is appropriate for him, all things considered, but outside of a couple of special cultists that can give you these higher level cult settlements that do really end up benefiting you in a substantial way in your campaign, a lot of the things in the Changeling campaign from a settlement standpoint do not hold up. The problem is, one of the key problems is that every building requires cult supplies. You can't just construct a building for money. I mean, even if you could construct things just for money, that in itself would be enough of a limiting factor, but every single building requires you to get cult supplies. And that is a pretty big issue, because the campaign pace is absolutely focused on you going out there and doing things. And the Changeling, due to his nature in combat and on the campaign map, he can absolutely bypass any kind of enemy point of resistance or defeat all of them together. In fact, that's kind of the point. You're not there to play a passive campaign. You're there to go out there and get things done. But when you tie it all to cult supplies, that creates issues. The bigger issue, when we think about the situation, is, for instance, in the Empire, in the theater of war where you start, you have a requirement, or one of the objectives is to go sack Altdorf or construct a ravaging host. It's just much better to avoid having to take Altdorf in itself. It allows you time, for instance, over here to go deal with Festus in this situation, and just construct the settlement in itself. But that's going to consume a lot of your early game cult supplies. So that means, what will that result in? that will result in diminished unit recruitment and less choice and less unit variety that you have. This is really a big problem because it means even a lot of the fun units that Siege has, by the time you can even recruit them, they are kind of meaningless to recruit. Because consider an army like this. There is nothing, and I do mean very, very little, at turn 16 that is going to stand up against a full horde of Chaos Warriors of Siege. If you want more damage, you can always pair it up with Forsaken of Siege just for that frenzy capability. But the combination of Chaos Warriors of Siege with halberds, Chaos Warriors of Siege with shields, is a very deadly combination that overwhelms the vast majority of forces. So why would you even construct more buildings? You can get more effects, but that just means you end up playing a campaign where one of the main factors that could be fun, the battles, and the wide variety of units you can use in the battles, because Siege does have a wide variety of units. You know, Chaos Knights of Siege with lances, nothing to sneeze at. The flying units, the flamethrower units, change bringers, etc. Those could be really fun, but vast majority of the time, whenever you're using them just for show. I've played Changeling campaigns, and I can tell you honestly that it can be cool using those units, absolutely, but when you are playing the campaign, they really do not matter. And that's really when you combine the settlement aspect with the way that affects unit recruitment, those are two issues in one, really. So number 2, number 3, the settlement structure does not really work out that well. I think it's one thing to ask cult supplies for, say, economic buildings, absolutely. So everything related to economy or spreading cults, that should cost cult supplies, but unit recruitment should just be handled normally. Of course, that does tie into point number 4, which is that the Changeling has a ridiculous level of power in that every time he takes over a settlement with a cult, it's kind of ridiculous. Obviously, it's tied to point number 2 about settlements not working properly, because when you build a cult, you're not destroying the settlement. You can raise it if you want to, but that doesn't build your cult, and you want to spread your tentacles, if you will, in everyone's settlements. And that's not great when you think about it. That's really number 4. You play a campaign where your armies are almost always invisible to anyone. You cannot lose a campaign very easily. If you lose all your armies, then your cults become visible, but that's not something the AI will take advantage of. So you're in this kind of situation where flat out there's almost never any risk in a campaign, regardless of how hard you try. I call it the Intern Button Simulator campaign for a reason, because that's exactly what you're doing. It can be fun once or twice doing the whole charade of going around the world, doing all these schemes when they work. But here's the problem. When you build a massive empire that isn't an empire that has factions alive, even the interns themselves end up dragging on, because you're not reducing the number of factions on the map. And as a result of that, your actual interns end up being longer. And because you're not destroying factions, even if you raise their territory, they'll just reconquer it. Say what you will about Khorne. Khorne at least raises territory to talk about it. Like, when you're playing a Khorne campaign, you are having an actual meaningful impact on the campaign map. With the Changeling, it's more of an annoyance. And that's, by the way, not a service to his character. The Changeling had a major impact in the actual Warhammer lore. Just look at what he did in the end times. He was the reason why Gelt was expelled from the Empire. And that impact of Gelt being revealed for using necromancy ended up actually costing the Empire everything. When we talk about the Changeling as a character, we need to understand he is not an irrelevant side character. He's a really dangerous, really deadly, really important character in the actual lore. And his representation in the game is not befitting his character. Maybe that's what Creative Assembly should look at towards improving with regards to him in the end times. And that's kind of the big point, really, the final point. He doesn't feel like a meaningful legendary lord on the campaign map. Whereas in the lore, he always does feel. He stirs shit up, he creates things, he creates chaos, and that's the kind of chaos that has significant effects in actual lore for actual empires. He's toppled empires, nation states, cities. If we look at Age of Sigmar, I believe he's active in Age of Sigmar if I'm not mistaken. I'm not necessarily all that familiar with Age of Sigmar lore, but he's been active. That's how he operates in the lore, and that is not really represented all that well in the game. Surprisingly, I just don't think they necessarily... I think they struggled kind of to deal with the whole Tzeentchian aspect in a campaign. The fact that they were trying to do things like changing a voice and all that, the structure of the game in itself probably is not well suited for Tzeentch, and that's always something that has hurt Tzeentch the most in a campaign. Though, I would counter that and say that when we look at campaigns that are about being sneaky, we can look at Cao Cao and Free Kingdoms. We can also look and take into consideration the impact of a campaign like the Skaven or Vampire Counts, who do have the ability of using manipulation and scheming and all that. Like, you can play a Skaven campaign and be just as big, if not a bigger manipulator than the Changeling is, which is ridiculous because the Skaven, from a lore standpoint, tend to fail in a lot of their schemes, whereas the Changeling actually gets shit done when you think of the lore. Meanwhile, when we look at the schemes here, some of them may feel meaningful, but a lot of them are just scripted events that do not have any significant impact, whereas the Skaven, who do it more organically within the confines of a regular campaign, actually do feel impactful in terms of like region trading, swapping territory, or the Vampire Counts, or even Tomb Kings with their vassalization agreements. Yes, you can vassalize factions, but funnily enough, I would say out of the two characters, it's Kairos that actually represents Tzeentch better in terms of that whole manipulation aspect than the Changeling does. And that is kind of a tragedy because Kairos should be all about the magical capability of Tzeentch and that study of magic. Also prophecy, trying to figure things out and all that kind of stuff. That is all I had to say. Let me know what you guys think about it. What would you guys like to see about this campaign being done by Creative Assembly, if anything? Or do you just think that the resources would be better allocated elsewhere and that the boat has sailed, so to speak, with Shadows of Change? I mean, let me be clear. I think out of the campaigns of Shadow of Change, I would focus far more on improving on Bo and Ostankia. I think those are far more relevant campaigns. But it is quite the silent tragedy of Tzeentch in general that their campaigns have ended up being such nothing burgers, if you will, in the grand scheme of things. And maybe that's just as planned. We'll see. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. And I'll see you boys and girls on the next one. Stay tuned.